Hello and welcome. Today I will be talking about the Arizona Cardinals. I will be discussing their market share, their potential scoring for next year, and their most productive zones. If you like this video, don't be afraid to press that like button. Now, let's dig in. Looking at their opportunity pool for next year, the Cardinals' opponents tend to give up a lot of plays. Playing against divisions such as the NFC South and NFC East gets the opponent's side of the formula pretty big. Looking at the bottom line, we will see from the opponents 563 passes and 417 rush attempts given up. Looking at the Cardinals' own trends show that their play calling fluctuates quite a lot from season to season. I have looked from 2014 to 2016. Combining the opponents and the Cardinals' trends, we get passes and rush attempts with 574 and 417. Their market share is divided up into target share, where the wide receiver 1 sees most of the targets. He sees 23% of all targets, while their running back number 1 sees almost as much as their wide receiver number 2. If you'd like to switch around who's wide receiver number 1 or 2 or 3, you can do that on your own, just using the same numbers. If you have any questions about how I came up with the formula, you can hit me up on Twitter at QALLED. The other market share is the share of carries, where David Johnson is just a battering ram and sees most of the carries with 69%. I just bunched up the other running backs with 31, since it doesn't really matter who's 2 or 3 when David Johnson is just gonna take everything. The first player we're looking at today is Carson Palmer, as you can see. And all projections are based on 16 games with full health and standard scoring. So for a player like Palmer, it can be difficult to achieve all the numbers with his health concerns. But anyway, Palmer's passing trends will show a guy that prefers throwing in a certain direction a lot more than another one. And that direction is the right side. You will see from his passing trends that 6% of his passes go to the left, while 7 goes to the deep right, while 27 goes to the short left, and 30 goes to the short right. That means that a player that's better catching on the right side of the field will most likely gain a little bit more fantasy points. Palmer is the first QB this year to have a negative rushing projection with minus 16.8, but his total is pretty decent with 262 points. David Johnson is one of this year's top 3 picks for everyone, it seems like, and he has just an extreme workload, so if he can stay healthy, top 3 position should not be a reach for him at all. Seeing he can get 84 targets and 289 carries with my projections. His best receiving zone is the deep left, where he averages 23.3 yards per reception, but he has only seen 7 targets over his NFL career in that zone. His most productive short zone is the right one, and his most targeted zone is the short left. Looking at his downs, we can see that he stays on the field for almost every down and performs well in every situation. When looking at his totals, there's not a big surprise that I have him projected as the number 1 fantasy running back for next year. with a total of 298.6 fantasy points. When I first heard this quote by Fitzgerald, he became one of my favorite players in the NFL. I think it's a great quote and a good example to live by, especially if you're a father. I still have him as the Cardinals' #1 receiver with 23% of the target share, which leads to roughly 130 targets. He catches almost every ball thrown to him, and seeing as Palmer preferred the right side and Fitzgerald catches 61% of the deep ones and 66% of the short ones, that can be a good synergy. It is also on the right side, he produces most of his yards with 21.8 in deep ones and 10.4 in the short ones. If we're looking at a different quarterback with Fitzgerald, he could have had 944 yards, but adjusting for Palmer, it gets to 910, so that's not a big difference. As a #1 receiver, I project Fitzgerald to not have an amazing season, but with 85 receptions and 118.3 standard points, he will be more than serviceable in PPR. And some notable things are that he's getting older and his average yards are going down, even if his targets are going up. Looking at the other 3 receivers, it was difficult for me to place them, so I asked around on Twitter, and at DNGFootball and at DFF_Shane provided me with this placement with John Brown as the second guy, JJ Nelson as the third, and Jarron Brown as the #4 guy. The interesting thing for me here, looking at these 3 players, is how similar John Brown and JJ Nelson's scoring and just everything is pretty much the same for the 92 targets and 86. Their best zone is the short right, where John Brown will see roughly 190 of his yards gained, and JJ Nelson 223 from that zone only. The fantasy points from receiving will be extremely similar with 79.2 and 73.5. Here, John Brown is still in the lead in fantasy points, but looking at the touchdowns, he will start to decline just a little bit with 39.9, while Nelson gets 40.9. So, adding those 2 up, we see that Nelson is the better guy in total fantasy points, even though he has 6 fewer targets. And that to me is something to think about, since I have him ranked as their #3 receiver. If he was ranked as the #2, he might have scored even higher, or he would have scored even higher. A quick look at Jermaine Gresham tells us a story of a pretty lackluster fantasy tight end. He does not get that many targets and does not break the 100-yard mark for a single zone, which shows that he does not stick out anywhere on the field. As you can see, these numbers do not make you want to jump around or write home about. My numbers project a total of 43.3 fantasy points for him in 2017, and I do not suggest you pick him up. Looking at the Cardinals 2017 projection in the light of last year, Carson Palmer, he would have ended as QB9, which would have been amazing for him. He has a chance to get this next year, but with his health and age in mind, I'm a little bit unsure. Fitzgerald, John Brown, and Nelson all would have finished top 40, which once again puts us in a difficult situation knowing which Cardinal receiver to start each week. I don't think I need to say anything about DJ, since his workload and abilities is as close to a sure thing as you can get. I'm expecting the Cardinals to bounce back from last year and provide us with great fantasy value. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked the video, please press that like button and subscribe for more content. Head over to csdfantasy.com for more charts and numbers. And as always, the spreadsheets are dark and full of terror.